welcome back to the Chosen Life podcast with one of my favorite people on the planet. This man has forgotten more about sports than I will ever know. He's the one and only Wayne Frazier Jr. of Doug Laurie Sports. Wayne, welcome back to the Chosen Life.
Good morning. I especially wore my hot air balloon shirt this morning so it would look nice and bright for everybody. Um, Glad to be here again.
Well, we're going to jump into an important topic because, of course, the city of Toronto is a buzz. And not because of the Blue Jays, because that ain't been too fun, not because of the Raptors, but because of our favorite Maple Leafs or Maple Laughs, as they like to be called. And so, a couple items here that have been heavily discussed. I know you're going to have definite thoughts on the subject matter. Let's go to the elephant in the room, why don't we? And it's Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner, we love him, we hate him. Another year on his deal, no trade clause. The word on the street is he's gonna be heading to Vegas. They're gonna find a way to make him remove his no trade. He will go there. We need to shake it up. We need to get a goaltender in here. We need to get a good defenseman in here. Wayne, do we keep Mitch? Do we not keep Mitch? What's your thoughts on the subject matter?
It's a really tough call because there's just not a whole lot out there this year that if you were to move Marner and say, well, we've got all the salary cap space, okay, to use on what? Like your best free agents are probably Jake Gensel. Okay, he's probably not coming here. Steve Stamkos, Sam Reinhart. I mean, there just aren't a lot of big guys to replace Marner. But I don't think that's really the consideration here. I think the consideration is you just have to break up that core 4 or 5 if you want to include Riley in there. And it's right now, I mean, I think as of the word I heard recently was that he had submitted a no trade list or a trade list of 9 teams to the management. Now, somebody cheekily said, well, what if it was all 9 teams that were right up against the salary cap? And so it basically was no, you can't move me, right? I don't think that's the case here. Marner is a fantastic player. I don't hold a lot of what's happened here against him, but I also, at some point you've got to move on and you've got to change the chemistry and the culture of the team. And the signing of the new coach and the GM they brought in last year is a step in that direction. Some of the players he brought in that Trey Leaving brought in are a step in that right direction. And like I said, I am pretty happy with how they played in the playoffs. If they had Matthews, I think they would have won that series. That's just the way that stuff works, right? Excuse me. And Nylander being out for a while too. But I think it's just going to matter. There's going to be 2 factors, and the 2 factors are, can they make a deal that Mitch accepts? And what is it that the Leafs want back? And here's a couple of examples. Let's say that they say they have to get roster players back, which I don't agree with, but let's say that's what it is. That pretty severely limits who you're going to move Marner to, because anybody that Marner's going to want to go to, they're not going to want to give up good roster assets because they're close. So if you want to trade him to Carolina and you want to get back a defenseman or something, they're going to be like, well, but we need those guys, right? The one exception I think there is Vegas, because Vegas is in on everything. Could you get Shea Theodore and maybe Nicholas Hague for Marner? Theodore's an RFA, I believe. He's got 1 more year. He's going to get paid next year, but he's what the Leafs need, right? So that's a big possibility. I think the more likely thing, assuming that Marner will agree to it, is that he goes somewhere like Utah. Utah can give him a big contract. And here's the other thing. I'm not super familiar with how this works, and so I may be speaking wrong here, and you can correct me. But I know that Marner can get a longer deal re-upping with the Leafs. And none of this is going to happen until after July 1st when they pay his bonus out, because it makes him cheaper for the other team, whoever it is. But Marner can sign a longer contract with the Leafs than he can with anybody else, I believe, by a year or two. I would think that, let's say it's Utah, and let's say the number is 8 years and $12 million or something like that. Well, to Utah, what difference does it make? It helps them get to the cap floor every year, and they make that big splash, and they can give back a first and a second. They have so many picks. There's no way they're going to be able to keep them all. Or they can give you a first and a defenseman, or a second and a defenseman, or something like that. It's a matter of whether the Trey leaving and the Leafs are willing to accept picks instead of roster players. Now, can you trade the picks for the other players you need? Sure, you can. But the cupboard's pretty bare for picks. Would you rather keep those, picks to be able to use them, and especially if you're getting them from Utah, where are they going to be at in the draft? I would say that if you were playing, what are the odds of Marner being in a Leaf uniform next year? I think they're less than 50%. I don't think it's unthinkable, but I think that Marner has made it clear in some of his actions and kind of the way he is within his agents, some of the things his agents have said. And I think the Leafs have, I don't want to say soured on him, but they've just thought we can live without this guy, and we can definitely use the money in different ways in a better fashion than what they're giving him, what he's going to get, let's say.
So I'm in agreement with you as far as the odds, and I think it's even lower. I wouldn't say I don't want to make him the scapegoat. He's not Jack Perry in AEW, but having this whole scapegoat thing, it's you've gone down this road so many times. You almost need change just for the sake of making change, just so you can have a different vibe. You have to take one of the key components out. And so then the fans feel differently about it. The dressing room feels differently. And I would say you have abundance of riches in one area of the team. Going and trying to supplement in another area, not the worst idea in the world, especially goaltending and defense. Now, I have the realistic scenario and I have my dream scenario. I'm going to start with my dream scenario, okay? Because I think I've talked about this before, but I really, really see this as a good possibility. And it's one of those things that the last thing in the world you expect to see is the Yankees and Red Sox make a trade, but they did in the offseason. Verdugo, is a Yankee. So Boston Bruins go ahead and try to trade Linus Ullmark to the Kings. That falls through. He rejects the deal. He has 1 year left on his deal, and then he's an unrestricted free agent. They gave the job to Swayman. They'll still try to move him, try to supplement their team. In a perfect world, I would love to see a trade like this. Marner for Ullmark, but the Leafs put a condition in that they get a negotiation window of 72 hours to extend him. He's their number one guy. If Linus Ullmark is the number one goaltender for the Leafs next year, Marner's gone. You figure out the players to for salary cap purposes. I'm loving this deal. Wayne, number one, could this happen in the world? And number two, how would you like the Leafs with Ullmark?
I think the deal actually is one of those rare trades where it fits everybody, right? I mean, the Bruins are going to lose Ullmark at the end of the year one way or another anyway, right?
Right.
And the Leafs are definitely not re-signing Marner for the number that they're talking about. You know, I don't know whether Marner would want to play in Boston. I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't want to play in Boston, but let's say he does, right? I think this trade makes a lot of sense, and I think it you're getting. I think Leaf fans would tell you you're not getting enough for him. I really think that would be what they would say, and I would say, what else? What are you going to get that's better than Linus Ullmark if you are going to trade Marner somewhere else? If Linus Ullmark comes in and he's your starter, or he's your 1-1A with Joseph Woll, because he's shown he can do that, right? And let's say Ullmark is your goalie for the next 4 years, 5 years with Joseph Woll. What is that worth? Is that worth a first and a second from Utah? Is it worth Shea Theodore and Nick Hague? Yes, I think it is, right? And I wouldn't be too worried about the trading inside, because it's such a wildly different. You're trading such disparate assets. It's not like you're trading a defenseman for a defenseman. It's not like you're giving up, one of the teams being, oh, we're going to give them a first round and they're going to turn it into, Austin Matthews or something like that. You're trading assets that are depreciating by the day for you. It makes a lot of sense. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. I think the one question is how motivated is Boston to move Ullmark right now? How does Boston think they're going to be in the upcoming season? Do they think that they need Swayman and Ullmark both because they have really a good shot at running it through again or not? If I was Boston, I would be looking at that and thinking, I don't think we have a legitimate shot, not with Florida and the Rangers now and Carolina. Are we going to get through all those teams in the Eastern Conference to get to the Stanley Cup final again? I don't think so. The same way I feel that way about the Leafs to a certain extent. Um, but yeah, I think the trade makes perfect sense. It's just a matter of whether the teams are willing to pull the trigger on it. That's a lot of guts to trade Toronto and Boston going back and forth. That would really say something about the management of both teams.
You make the commitment to Swayman as the guy in your net, and you think about the past playoffs. What's more valuable to Boston, Marner on the ice on the first line,
Exactly.
or Allmark sitting on the bench wearing a baseball cap?
And hugging. Yeah. I
And
mean, and that's nothing against Linus Ullmark. It's just a better look. I'm kind of going through the same thing now in my fantasy football league right now. I have Patrick Mahomes and I have Trevor Lawrence. Okay. And I'm thinking about trading Mahomes, and people are like, why would you trade Patrick Mahomes? Well, I have Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence is probably 80 to 90% of the fantasy quarterback that Pat Mahomes is, right? And what I can get for Patrick Mahomes would benefit my team much more than that 10 to 20% difference between Trevor Lawrence and having Pat Mahomes and having Lawrence sit on my bench. So I think that's a real consideration for Boston. It's just a matter of, is Marner the fit that they want, or do they think if they hold on to Ullmark at the deadline, they can get something else? But again, what are you going to get for Ullmark at the deadline that's better than Mitch Marner?
you
Especially if Marner signs the deal, right?
you know that whatever LA was giving up was not the same as Marner. There's no way they gave up as much of an asset as Mitch Marner. So, in my estimation, I don't think Boston's gonna get any more than that. On the one hand, the Leafs are dreading the thought of having to go up against Marner in the playoffs in the first round, which would probably happen. But Boston, the same token, I don't think would want to face Allmark. But a motivated Allmark against this team could be pretty cool. But look, I look up and down the rosters of NHL teams realistically which goalies are entrenched, which could be available. There is nothing close to remotely available for the Leafs of the quality of an Allmark.
Right.
So, and this is where Boston get a lot for them, a lot for him, and I think it's a win-win for both teams too. I think this deal has to happen. I don't think it will happen for egos and for whatever other reason. Um, if the Leafs don't do much this offseason, I'll be very surprised. You know, they got to deal with Domi, Bertuzzi. There's so much going on there. But, let's bring it back that they played the coaching carousel, and Sheldon Keefe still had time on his deal. Why is he not heading off to Turks and Caicos or Jamaica for next year or two? Why would he remotely want to rip up that deal and sign with the Devils? Why not just take the free paid vacation?
Because the Devils are a better run organization than the Leafs, and you put yourself in a better position. You know, look, and I think too, I think if you're Sheldon Keefe, he had a 5-year run. I mean, you look at the guy's track record in the playoffs, like, my gosh, that's a pretty amazing one-loss record, right? I mean, he was outstanding. The team was outstanding. They just didn't get it done in the playoffs. Are we going to blame that on Sheldon Keefe? We shouldn't, but a lot of people do. And so if you were Keefe and you could step in and take over a team that has Jack Hughes, Luke Hughes, all this other talent, right, and has been kind of snake bitten over the last couple of years, and you right away can come in and they're going to make the playoffs next year. Are they going to go deep? I don't know if they're going to go deep, but they're going to make the playoffs. You very quickly can erase that. Oh, look, he can't win in the playoffs. They get to the playoffs and they win a round. Nobody is going to remember that about Sheldon Keefe next year. They're going to, rightly, they should be blaming Dubas and they should be blaming the players. It wasn't Keefe's fault. Other than, I feel like that he just could not get the buy-in from the top four or the top five that this is the way you have to play the game. And I think Trey Leaving did what he needed to do to get a little bit of that buy-in, which was bring different guys in that were just going to play that way and try to lead by example and take the pressure off the other guys. But no, I mean, sure, would it be nice to go spend a year or two Mike Babcock style coaching in college or doing whatever the hell it is you want to do and then getting paid and come back? But I think Keith really felt like I got to go out. I think the situation was right, and I feel like he had to go out and say, "Hey, I'm right back into it, and I'm hoping I'm here to knock the Leafs out of the playoffs next year."
I think him and Dubas were both very smart to take their jobs right away. And why I think that is because there's still this little aura about you that you came from this organization and things didn't click, but you were still great at your position and you still have that boy wonder and whatever thoughts people think about you. And if you take a year or two off, out of sight, out of mind, I don't think that they get the same kind of jobs respectively. So I think that was his thinking. That my question to you is now, if you're the Leafs, let's say hypothetically, if you could trade your entire roster for the Devils' entire roster, do you make that deal? Tough, right? I don't
It's
know.
it's not a you know what? It's not an easy call. I mean, I think at first glance you look at it and you think, well, gosh, but the depth that the Devils have and their top end is pretty damn good, right? And their goalie situation is quite a bit better than ours.
Oh, it can't be worse.
Well, I guess that's true. Um, I think I would still probably keep the Leafs roster. Um, but I think it's not as easy of a call as I think most people would just go, oh, well, Matthews and Nylander and this and that, right? Especially if you take Marner off the roster in a trade, then it gets much closer, right? So
So I got a conspiracy theory for you because I love my conspiracy theories. So again, I dream of a day where Linus Ullmark will be a Maple Leaf, and if he's not traded this season, then he's going to become a free agent, and then the Leafs are planning to sign him. So they're planning to try to reboot this 1 year, waiting for Ullmark, and Ullmark comes in a year later. But if that's not the case, I have another conspiracy in mind, which just came into my head because the Leafs go ahead and they get Berube, right? And they get Berube because they're waiting on Rod Brendamore and seeing what's going to happen in Carolina. Carolina's like, yeah, right. We ain't letting this guy go. He's freaking amazing. Very highly considered coach, right? So we get Berube. We like Berube because Berube is no nonsense and everything else. He does have that ring. He did do it. And my thinking is we bring Berube in and we say to him, okay, let's make a plan and let's get Jordan Binnington because you got Binnington playing like Houdini, and he calms down for you for the most part, and he trusts you. So we're gonna go to St. Louis, which is retooling, and let's find a way to get Binnington over here. And we want to take our chances with Binnington and Berube. Wayne, your thoughts on that?
I I like Jordan Bennington. He had a pretty good season last year. I mean, the Blues were not particularly great, but his save percentage was 913. Um, you know, he's a workhorse. You can play him 55 or 60 games. He likes to work that much. I have my questions whether that's the direction. Do the Leafs want a volatile guy in the net? And do they want a volatile guy to pair with Joseph Woll? I don't know whether that's the direction you want to go. If you're bringing Binnington in here, you're bringing him in here to be the number one for however long his contract is remaining, right? Are there better options out there that you could acquire and trade? I don't think so. I don't think anybody else has anybody on the block that you're like, oh, I want that guy. You know, I mean, John Gibson or older players, stuff like that. I just I don't
I-
think so, right?
I'm sure Kevin Reimer's available.
Oh yeah. I mean, we'd bring James back. Reimer would be fantastic, and he'd be a. But again, all those guys that were in the Leafs organization at one point, they're all second or third guys other places, right? Another guy that I would wonder if he would be available, and another guy that again I don't know whether he necessarily fits the mold right now is Mackenzie Blackwood. I mean, he has been shelled out there on the West Coast, but he's played well. And would the Sharks be willing to say, hey, look, you know what? We'll give up Blackwood to be the 1 and 1A with Wool, and we don't need a whole lot in return. They've got a lot of draft picks. We would take, whoever. Um, is that a possibility? I don't know. I don't know whether there's any thought about moving Blackwood or not. I just don't know about Bennington, and I don't know what the relationship is between Bennington and Berube. I know the relationship between Bennington and the front office of the Blues has been tenuous at best sometimes. And I don't know how much of that carries over to Berube or not. And I don't really know. Look, what it boils down to is we were just talking about, we're going through this 1 year and we're waiting on Ullmark. Assume that they trade Marner and they don't get anything, they get draft picks back for him, let's say. And assume they're able to move Tavares somehow. They get him to waive his no trade clause and he goes somewhere else. I think what has to happen then is that the Leafs have to go to Matthews and the rest of the team and say, we're not bringing anybody else in this year. Unless Stamkos wants to come in on a hometown deal or something, which I don't think. I think he'll resign. We're going to play Woll and Hildebeest. We're going to play Bobby McMahon. We're going to play Nick Robertson every friggin' game. We're gonna play Fraser Minton. We're gonna play Matthew Nyes. We're gonna play all these guys because we don't think we're there to go to win a cup anyway this year. We're gonna see what we have. And if we really can, if Robertson turns out to be what I kind of think Nick Robertson is, which is a pretty damn good scorer, then that's one less guy we have to go sign in the offseason next year, and we can commit that to even other things, right? So I view this year that way. I view this year as it's not really a run it back year because even if Tavares is still on the team, and if you want to talk about Tavares briefly, my thoughts there are you go to John and say, look, no offense, we're not resigning you next year. So if you allow us to trade you now, you may be able to extend with the team that we trade to and get 3 or 4 more years at a pretty good rate. But if you play the way you played this year and you go out on the free agent market next year at 35, what are you going to get? 2 or 3 years at 4 or 5 million a year? Maybe. I don't know what kind of contract is out there for him, right? So I think they have that carrot that they could maybe, say, we can help you get. And it's a situation where they might even retain some of his salary for this season, knowing that he's not going to be on the books after this year. And what difference does it make? Right. And then you maybe get a reasonably decent draft pick back for him.
My worry with him with Tavares is that you retain salary at the retained salary. I'd rather just at what talent you're going to get back for him, at what number. I feel like you're moving sideways at best. I still think that's your captain. He's the Toronto guy. It's kind of a bad message having signed him as a free agent and getting rid of him from his hometown. Unless somebody knocks your socks off that you can get something in the equivalent of him that's not him. But I don't know what team's going to do that. I feel like you're going to take an aging asset back, or you're going to take back a fringe type prospect. Like if they're going to like, say you go to the Blackhawks, like, listen, I know you guys are ready to always take our problem contracts off our hands. Here's another first round. Like, I'm not giving them a first or second round pick and sending Tavares just so I can get rid of the contract. It's going to be interesting. I think Tavares stays, and I think Marner does end up going. To me, it falls along the line of Domin Bertuzzi, and in my world, I think they're going to find a way to keep both. I think they like both. I think the style of what they bring. I know not everybody's in love with them, but I don't think there's much out there, like you said, and definitely nothing that's going to be better than Domin Bertuzzi. So I'm cool with them coming back and playing with Matthews. And the issue to me is goal, and it's a defense. So maybe you could acquire a couple free agent defensemen, but I'm going to come down to Ullmark, Binnington, and where they're going to go to. But it starts and ends with Berube, and I like the decision to hire him. I like the enforcer type guy, the no nonsense in the dressing room. Key for all his warts, seems like a good stand-up guy, but I don't think he has the same aura as Berube. And I think Berube would just bring a different message to the dressing room. Um, I think they're going to respond well to him. I think it was a good hiring. I'm okay with this.
I am too. I mean, I think, if you give me my druthers and you said, well, you could pick any guy you want to run the team, I would be asking, how do I get John Tortorella here? Um, because I think that's what this team needed. And maybe that's a little extreme, right? But I think that Berube is sort of a step, I don't want to say a step down in coaching ability from Tortorella, but he's maybe one step down from the hard ass level of Tortorella. And that's what these guys need. I think they need somebody who's going to come in and say, hey, you have got to play the way that I want you to play. And I don't care, what name is on the back of your jersey. I don't care what your salary cap hit is. If you don't play the way I want you to play, you're going to go sit in the press box or I'll send you down. Right. Um, I, just to touch briefly on Domi and Bertuzzi, do I have a problem with them coming back? I don't have a problem, especially Domi. I really think that Domi, because he wants to be here so badly, I really think he can sort of step in and take over the captaincy of this team. I really believe that. He can be the Nazem Kadri that they keep letting go here. But if that number is 5 years at $5 or $6 million a year, I'm sorry. And it's the same with Bertuzzi. That's just too much money for those players, I guess. I mean, if the salary cap's going up, what does that really mean? What's the percentage hit and everything else? But the Leafs have that habit of giving Ryan Reeves $4 million a year for 4 years. And you think, well, it's just $4 million. Yeah, it's just $4 million until you need to sign somebody later on in the year and you're $30,000 short of the cap. You've got to find a couple of guys who are values, right? If you're going to keep those guys. Now, if they do keep Domi and they keep Bertuzzi both, then I think you are going to see they'll find some way to move Tavares to clear the space and whatever they have to do. And then you're going to see them play a bunch of cheaper guys, kids this year to see what's going on, right? But I think Berube was the right hire. I mean, I look at always what's out there when you let your coach go. And I think they knew in advance Berube is the guy. I think the only guy that they might have said maybe we want this guy more would have been Joel Quenneville.
That's
And I,
exact.
I just I just don't think the Leafs are going to bring him in.
I think
Um,
I think after what happened before with Babcock and then Quenville as well in that kind of genre, they needed somebody a little more squeaky clean. How about
yeah,
that? And
yeah, and I
I,
think you're right.
I feel bad for Quenville because look, that guy was. I remember when he was an assistant under the Leafs forever and ever and ever, and then how he developed as a head coach. And look, somebody will take a chance on them, no doubt. I feel like it'll be one of those things that, you have that talented, like the Islanders, for example, when they bring up Patrick Waugh, they're like, hey, you know what? We got to shake the up. Patrick Waugh's the guy, where a lot of teams wouldn't want to touch Patrick Waugh. So I feel like that's the kind of Quinn will be like a mid-season type hire to ignite a fire. But no, I didn't think he'd get hired. And it was Berube from the beginning. And yeah, I think he'll have a pretty decent season. I'm very interested to see what that roster is going to look like opening night. So I'm going to reserve any predictions on the Leafs for the playoffs next year until I see that roster construction because a lot's going to change. And again, mark my words, if Linus Ullmark, Jordan Binnington are in goal opening night face off, then I'm feeling a lot better about this team. To me, it's going to begin and end in goal. Like if you're going in with what you got and they don't make any moves from a goaltending standpoint, we're not going to get a very good result back.
I agree with you, but I would also say that as much as you could have Dominic Hasek back there, and if your decor is Morgan Riley and whoever the hell else you have laying around in the locker room that night, it's going to be pretty tough, right? So to me, that really is, to me, that's the driving factor in whether Marner is here this year and they just let him walk, or whether they get assets for him, right? If they're able to get somebody like Shea Theodore or something like that, then I think I'm okay with Wool, right? I'm fine with him. There's not much else out there. Like I was looking on the free agent market, and I was like, okay, well, the most expensive goalie hitting the free agency market is Matt Murray this year, who was playing at the end of the year last year. Remember, but the next goalie down from that is Samsonov, and then it's Chris Drager, right, from Seattle, um, and Carter Hart, and Hart's in limbo right now, right? And that's a guy that, again, no matter what happens, I don't think the Leafs are probably bringing him in, right?
Is he playing in Mexico? Oh no, that was Trevor Bauer, right? No, sorry, sorry,
Yes,
sorry.
it's Trevor Bauer. Yes, so
Yes, but
so I just I would say that looking at the let's even if you take Marner and Tavares off the roster and you don't add anybody else in, I still think this is a playoff team this coming year with Wool and whoever else is going to come in and be the second banana. Whether it's Hildeby or whether they bring, whether they play Murray or something like that, right? I mean, I can't imagine they're going to play Murray, but whoever it is that they bring in, Martin Jones is still kicking around too, right? Um, we joked about it, but how nice would it be to have James Reimer on your bench
I keep
as the
mixing him up with
second guy, right?
I always mix him up with the baseball player Kevin Reimer, but
Yeah,
listen, unless he's wearing his sunglasses at night, I don't think we're gonna get hard and goal over here. So
no.
it's not. I don't think that's gonna happen. So let's see about those Leafs. But we're gonna have to pause here because next we gotta prepare for next week. Because next week Wayne is gonna go on an epic rant. This is gonna be so fun to watch. I love a good Wayne rant. So I'll give you guys a hint. It's gonna be on the Toronto Blue Jays. So that is Wayne Frazier Jr. of Doug Laurie Sports, Jonathan A. Cohen of the Bible 3.0. And we'll be back next week and we're going to talk some more sports here on the Chosen Life podcast.